Come on in and sit down. You cut the hardcore crew chewing the fat. You cut us shooting the shit. You cut us in the moment. Sunday, Extreme Rules, I don't think it's really need talking about. I think we can honestly all agree it sucked overall.
Yeah, exactly.
I just thought the old pay-per-view just lacked anything of interest. It was just thrown together in 5 minutes, it seemed like.
Well, I am a little nostalgic with the Luke Harper, Dean Ambrose thing, where they used a tactic that they used back at WrestleMania 12 with the Hollywood Backlight Brawl. They took off and then came back about halfway through the card. I enjoyed that.
Well, we are in the moment, and moving on to the topic of discussion, of course, is WWE versus UFC, and which is the tougher business to succeed in. And we're going to have this be a point-by-point based system, and this is going to be really a hard one to talk about. I mean, I'm more of a wrestling fan, so Andy, we know that you know that you both follow the UFC as well as the WWE. What do you think is harder for a wrestler or a fighter to succeed in?
I think the problem, if it's like someone who's been big in the WWE, we'll take CM Punk as an example. They come with a lot of baggage, and people are expecting a lot more because they're an ex-wrestler. Not so much to see if they're any good, but just to see if they can actually fight. And unfortunately, a lot of wrestlers who've come from wrestling that go into UFC have not really been able to hack it. I mean, people like... I wouldn't like to have a fight with Brock Lesnar. No way, shape or form. But is he an ultimate fighting wrestler? In my opinion, not really. He was just a lump of lard that had got a big bit of a good punch and had a lucky couple of wins and won a championship against a no-hoper, or an has-been, more to the point. I just hope CM Punk is not going to be going through the same route that the likes of Brock Lesnar have done and Bobby Lashley, where they fight nobodies for the first half a dozen fights, and then suddenly they get up against a good opponent who hands them their arse.
Well, somebody I think with CM Punk going to UFC probably has a little bit of a stepping stone, because let's be honest, he's more of a celebrity going into UFC. But if you look at somebody when they first start off, when they want to get into wrestling, you look at wrestling, there's politics. Would we agree?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to interrupt, the good thing about CM Punk going in, and I think this is why he says he wants to get super fit. As you've just said, I watch almost all the pay-per-view UFC matches I can, and I know Lance watches quite a few. To be perfectly honest, the weight category that CM Punk is in, not many people are any fucking good, to be perfectly honest. They are the piss break matches that when the WWE's on and the Divas come on, they are the matches that you go for a piss.
What's he going to be, middleweight?
Yeah, they are.
I disagree with them.
All they tend to do, 90% of the time, are like wrestling skills. There's no punching. It's mostly locking, holding, rolling around the floor, which will suit CM Punk fine. If CM Punk had to have a stand-up, slug it out, beat 'em up fest, I don't think he'd stand a chance. If it comes to wrestling skills, then he's got more of a chance than anyone else, because he's got the wrestling background. He knows how to do choke holds and so on, which 90% of the time, as much as we like to see somebody bash somebody's face in and bleed, most UFC fights end up in a choke hold, and that will be Punk's speciality. If it comes to a toe-to-toe boxing match, I don't think CM Punk stands a chance with any of them.
So you say over politics versus simply winning, you think that CM Punk would do better in the WWE?
Yeah. He'll make more money. He'll make more money in UFC.
Well, we're going to get to that in a minute, because right now and I think that, some wrestlers or UFC fighters always say that, you know what, I can always win and it doesn't matter. All I have to do is win and I make my money. And CM Punk, he has this huge, illustrious contract.
Yeah, I mean, Dana White's going to love me for this, but how many of his fights are going to be paid for fights? In other words, how many people are going to take a dive? Now, there'll be some true diehard UFC fighting fans listening to this going, Dana White's not going to be very happy with a comment like that. You can pull up any videos on YouTube and find ex-champions who say, I took a dive for the right amount of money.
So now you're suggesting that in UFC, people are taking dives.
Yes, without a shadow of... I've seen people who've been knocking 10 bells of shit out of someone in a 4-round contest, 3 of the 4 rounds, and then they get choked on the apron when you think, come on, you basically just lay on the floor and give your body up.
Okay. Lance, you've been a little bit quiet. Your thoughts, politics over just simply winning, and your thoughts about what the son of a bitch just said.
Well, I do believe it's in a way easier to succeed in the UFC than it is in the WWE. One, because you're just going in there and you only have one thing to overcome in the UFC, and it's the other guy across from you. In WWE, you got pretty much the freaking politics of the entire thing, and if the boss likes you or not. And it's not as, you're not fighting as much. Granted, you're still training, which is still taxing on your body, but it's not you're not fought as it's been described in a car wreck night after night after night after night. That's kind of debatable, because I even seen in a shooting interview I got at Best Buy, Ken Shamrock was asked whether how much of UFC was a worker. He says he was not at liberty to disclose that, which to me means some portion is. So,
all right, well, let's talk about injuries, since you were kind of talking about kind of working out and stuff, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with injuries, as I like to get over to like the WWE, which also with UFC. I really don't know how often UFC trainers get injured, although I did pick up an article about how study shows that MMA brain injury risks are higher than boxers. It just went on to show how modern day now that's why they're stopping fights a little bit more and more and more, because apparently where back in the day they would just knock the hell out of them, and now the second that fighters just don't show any sign of fighting, they just stop the fight instantly. But in the WWE, you can have all these major injuries, and they just keep on going. As again, go back, I guess, to CM Punk, where he had that back injury, and he was going on for like 2, 3, 4 weeks, and they just did not stop. They didn't care. It's like, hey, yeah, when can you go back to work? They didn't care. They didn't want him healthy. So I'm not sure, again, as to where, how UFC's, wellness issues are. I don't know if they don't give a shit, or if they want you to say, hey, look, you're not perfectly 100% healthy, or if they say, look, you need to fight. We also looked recently with Daniel Bryan, and they pulled him from a match. Andy, your thoughts? With
WWE, the biggest problem is with watching some of the interviews, again with like Lance and so on, wrestlers are they're afraid of losing their spot. If you're not on the show every single week, they are frightened that the next upcoming star is going to nick their spot. In the UFC, the average UFC fighter probably has 4 fights a year.
Yeah.
So you have a fight, you get a severe kicking. Even if you win, you have a severe kicking. You've probably got 3 or 4 months to recover before you come back on. And they don't need to fight as often as WWE stars, and they get paid the same amount of money, if not more. So people like CM Punk, although he'll be taking a lot more punishment when he's in a UFC arena, he's only doing it 4 times a year as opposed to 300 days a year. And I know which one I would prefer. If someone says you can either work 300 days for $1 million or 4 days for $1 million, which do you want to go for? It's a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest.
You look at somebody recently, though, like Brock Lesnar, who was recently in UFC, had an opportunity to go back, but for some reason he turned that down with the WWE. And, to stay with the WWE. So the question is, why didn't he go back to UFC? And I think the simple answer is, let's be honest, he's only wrestling part-time. I think if he was forced to wrestle full-time like he was before, I think he probably would have jumped on and went back to the UFC. So where he's not really doing a lot of heavy lifting, so to speak, at the WWE, and where at the UFC has to do real fights where he could actually get viably hurt. I think he made the honest choice. Do we agree?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are reading wrong into the Brock Lesnar, because from what I've been reading on the internet about Brock Lesnar and Dana White likes people like CM Punk to come in and sign a 20-fight or 2 or 3 year deal. Brock Lesnar wants to come in and sign a 6-month to a 12-month deal. And I think Dana White, like everybody else, is thinking, fuck you, I need to pay money for a star that I can promote, that can promote my product. Brock Lesnar to Dana White is what The Rock is to the WWE. Comes and goes when he feels like. Does Dana White want somebody like that on his books? Not really.
Yeah. And you know what, Lance? Let's talk about all the major injuries that's happened in the WWE. You know, I mean, alone. You know, you talk about the death of Owen Hart in 1999. Triple H tearing his quad in 2001. Owen Hart had broken Steve Austin's neck, and when he botched a pile driver in the SummerSlam in 1997. The list goes on and on and on. I don't think UFC has ever had those kind of injuries.
Yeah, in the UFC, you might get a broken arm if somebody didn't tap out from an armbar, but it's nothing. It's not major like a broken neck or anything, or it's nothing life threatening. But
yeah,
then again, these guys do all these death defying moves in wrestling, like you're dropping somebody on their head or trying to create the illusion of dropping somebody on their head, and you mess that up, you can really fuck somebody up.
I would say out of the 3 professional sports, if you can call them sport, we'll use sports or sports entertainment. You've got boxing, wrestling, UFC. Not necessarily in that order. I'm not picking them in that order because that's the order they deserve to be in.
Yeah.
But you've got the 3. Boxing, you are basically standing toe-to-toe, and the idea is to knock your opponent out, give them brain injuries. UFC is a mixture of boxing and wrestling,
and
so you get very few brain injuries, and wrestling is the one really that suffers the worst damage. I would say in order, wrestling is the most accident-prone of the sports. Boxing is probably second, and UFC is low down as number 3. Oh,
exactly.
The worst injuries you're going to get in a UFC tournament are probably no worse than most 18-year-olds will get in a street brawl on a Saturday night after a few Red Bulls and a sniff of the barmaid's apron, as my dad used to call it. You're going to get a thick lip, a black eye, couple of stitches, maybe a broken finger or a broken wrist. You're fit to fight another day. Boxing, you could get brain damage. Wrestling, you could end up in a wheelchair, as people like Droz have proved on no end of times.
And I guess when you get down to it, this is the next one I want to talk about. It's really the entertainment value. And we could all say this all comes down to your own personal opinion. Now, a lot of people who say that, and some people would say that MMA is much more entertaining. Some would say boxing is more entertaining, and others would say wrestling is more entertaining. We'll just say, which one can that fighter succeed in? Andy?
I think now, I'll put them in a category of 3 like I've done before. Now, don't beat me up, listeners, to say wrestling's not a sport. We're using it hypothetically.
No, I'm not talking. I didn't say as a sport. I said as a business.
Yeah. When it comes down to who now does the best package, the promotion, eye candy for us to watch on the TV, and the production value, I would quite happily say that in 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't have said this, but now I think I categorically say we've got the Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao. So boxing is definitely number 1. They get your juices flowing, and they know how to do it well. Number 2 is UFC. They've blown WWE out the water for their production value, and WWE now is looking like a company that have just been working at it for a couple of months. They have lost their way. UFC have pinched all the ideas from the WWE and made them better, and boxing have far surpassed any other form of entertainment stroke sport. And I guarantee any of you guys who are paying for the Manny Pacquiao fight and Floyd Mayweather, and this is not an advert for them, by the way, we're not being paid to say that, you will be seriously entertained, even if the match sucks. You will be severely entertained by their entrances, intros, video packages that they'll have. I guarantee it'll blow UFC and WWE out of the water for the last 2 or 3 years what they've produced.
So, Lance, your thoughts. Which is the tougher business to succeed in as far as entertainment value?
Well, of the three, honestly, because for the entire show, I'd have to put boxing third for consistency, because besides Mayweather Pacquiao, when's the last time anybody ever gave a rat's ass about a fight? What, about maybe 5-10 years ago, something like that? It's been a while. Mm-hmm. But production-wise and entertainment-wise, whether you're going to get an entertaining production in the actual ring, because three of them, I know one's an octagon, but yeah, same shit. You're 9 times out of 10 going to get an entertaining show from UFC. Setting WWE's, I've got to give UFC the entertainment value. I have to.
How hard is it for the actual person, the fighter?
Wrestling.
If, let's say,
I would say wrestling without a shadow of a doubt.
Exactly. That was the question I was trying to...
Yeah, it's harder to get into wrestling big time and earn lots of money like John Cena than it is in UFC or boxing, because boxing, all you need is a license, a pair of boxing gloves, and you can fight anybody, but within reason. And the same with UFC. If you're stupid enough to get yourself in there with Rampage Jackson, you can buy yourself a fight with Rampage Jackson. It's that easy in the UFC. I mean, I've seen people in the UFC that I'd take on.
Yeah, but for to be successful, almost apples and oranges a little bit, because while the WWE and wrestling in general, they're doing it day after day after day. From what I've seen for what these major guys do to prepare for fights, they're training a good 12 hours a day. So it's the whole difficulty level, I'm not quite sure.
Let me put a spin on this. Let's say with a UFC fighter. Let's say if you're not even let's say if you're a popular UFC fighter and you start getting wins and wins and wins. Do fans get behind you regardless?
Yeah. In UFC, they have fan followings like The Rock, Austin, Brock Lesnar. They have diehard fans who will follow their hero from day one till the day they retire.
And it's just based on whether they win or lose.
The thing is with wrestling, everyone who gets in the ring, we'll use WrestleMania as an example. Everyone who gets in the ring and has a match, they are recognisable. When you watch, I'll guarantee, when you watch the Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao fight, the main event is one fight. The other people on the card, you will not have a clue probably who they are unless you follow the sport religiously. And the same with UFC. They have 2 main events now on most pay-per-views, and the rest I would call clusterfuck fights. I've seen better fights in the street. There's one guy who I remember from this UFC 187, the latest pay-per-view.
Yeah, 186,
a guy who won, and I swear he thought he was Rey Mysterio. He ran up the octagon and did a flip, and ran up the other side and did a flip. I would take him out in a street fight. That guy sucked, but he won. Huh. Where they found him from, I have no idea. And it was his first time in the octagon. And he fought a guy who my mother could have fought. They both sucked, but they were on a pay-per-view, because the pay-per-view in the UFC is 1 match or 2 matches at most. The rest are just fill-ins.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, over on the WWE, they choose who they want to push. They choose who's going to be in the matches. If they have somebody, like JTG, and they say, look, buddy, you're not getting over, we're pushing you down, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, people like Dolph Ziggler could be the number one big thing. If he was in UFC going through the same thing, he probably would be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Because in UFC, if you keep winning fights, you push yourself and you get more money, you get better fights. With the WWE, it's someone who's picking you as a booker who decides your career. And if you haven't got as we've said before, if you haven't got the it that John Cena's got, you can be the most phenomenal wrestler, and we'll use Neville, for example. You can be the most phenomenal wrestler in the world, but you won't get nowhere. You need it, and you can't train it. You can't buy it. And people have always said if they knew what it was, they would bottle it and sell it. You've either got it or you haven't. And unfortunately, I'll just use that Neville as an example. He hasn't got it. He's fantastic in the ring. Mike's skills suck. And him as a personality, he's not had enough time in the ring to show off his personality. So at the moment, he's just an hyperactive 3-year-old who's had too many numbers. When he gets in the ring, I find him entertaining, but he's like an hyperactive child that needs to chill out a bit.
Well, I think we should move on to our final category is boss versus boss. Dana White versus Vince McMahon. And, who really is the hotter guy to work for? Which, again, we're just speculating because we've never worked for either one of these guys. I mean, we've heard rumors, we've heard stuff, so both of these guys could be bastards to work for.
Yeah, I say, we can only go on what we've heard. I've never heard anything bad said about Dana White.
Oh, I have.
But Vince McMahon, you either love him or you hate him. There's no in between. From the only thing I've heard about Dana White, and I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, Vince will negotiate with people. If Vince wants a talent, if Vince wanted Rick as his up-and-coming star, Vince is more than happy to sit and negotiate some kind of deal. The only thing I've heard about Dana White, if Dana White wants Rick, he has already got his mindset, and he says, Rick, come work for me, I'll give you $2 million. And if Rick says, I want $2.5 million, Dana White says, it was nice meeting you, goodbye. To me, that is a good business head. You don't let the talent tell you what they're worth. They want to work for you. They've come to you for a job. They shouldn't dictate to you. I mean, imagine, you're probably laughing at this comment now, but imagine you work at Walmart. Your life is you get up in the morning and you're stacking shelves in Walmart. Yeah. How many of you tomorrow are going to go up to your boss? Boss, I want paid $20 an hour. What's your boss going to say?
Fuck you.
See ya.
Well, okay. Well, let's not $20 an hour, but I mean, if you say, "Boss, I want a raise," you never ask your boss for a raise.
Yeah, and 90% of the time they'll say, "We'll look into it," and that's as far as it ever goes.
No, not with me. I mean, I can tell you plenty of jobs where if they say, look, we're only hiring for such and such, and I've said, hey, look, I want this. It's called negotiation. And 99% of the times they'll say yes, and there's been like that 10%, they'll say no, but you can still work it out.
It depends. It really depends on what your job. I suppose it depends on what your job is and how easy they can get rid of you and get someone. But if you're doing like if
you're looking for an amateur job, I'm talking like a blue collar job. But if you're a professional, this should have some kind of a scale. If he says $2 million, but if you want like $2 million, like 2.25, he should be able to sit down and say, hey, let's talk about it. If he says no, that's just being a scumbag. Period.
Unfortunately, that must be then what Dana. From what I've heard with Dana White talks to his financial people, and he comes up with a package, and it's not negotiable. You take the package, or you're shown the door. And when Dana White's been on interview programs, they say, we believe that you're a bit ruthless with stars that want to get into Ultimate Fighting, and I agree with his comment that he came out with the last time he was asked the question. And he didn't say Brock Lesnar, but I'll use Brock Lesnar as an example. Brock Lesnar goes to him, or he goes to Brock Lesnar, $2 million, Brock. Brock says, no, I want 2.5. So Dana White says, see you, Brock. 12 months down the line, tap, tap, tap on the door. It's Brock Lesnar, wants to see you, and he'll negotiate the $2 million. And that's how he runs his business. He thinks if I can get someone for $2 million instead of 2.5, I'll do it. But he's not prepared to look like he's soft, where I think Vince is. I don't care what anyone says. Vince, when it comes to people like the Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair, whether it's Vince or Triple H and Shawn Michaels, for example, if they come sniffing round, and The Rock, if they come sniffing round, he'll pay them because he thinks they are bringing money into his company. And he pays them stupid amounts of money. For the amount of times that The Rock's been and gone, The Rock should be paid per fucking appearance. And he shouldn't be paid any more than probably $200, in my opinion.
You know what? And you're probably right, but I mean, let's be honest. The WWE, whether we like them or hate them, anybody likes or hate them, the WWE is the biggest wrestling company around today. There is nobody can compete.
I mean, imagine how you'd feel, and I'm sure I've got my figures correct, because I can remember we had a show all about this when it happened. Mayweather, when he fought the Big Show.
Mm-hmm.
Mayweather had a purse of $3 million, and I'm sure I'm correct in saying that. A one-off appearance, $3 million. There is probably 80% of the WWE roster who've worked for the company for 5 years plus that haven't grossed $3 million. In 5 years, this guy gets it in one fight that staged the shit.
Yeah, Vince, I do admit he is rather high on the celebrities, which I admit is very, very stupid. I don't deny that because, like you said, he feels that celebrities and the nostalgic wrestlers are a high on the draw, and to some extent, he has a point.
I mean,
do I think it's a high on the draw? No. Do you think it's a high on the draw? No. Do many fans think it's a high on the draw? No. But unfortunately, he has that in his head, and until somebody else comes along and takes over the company, that's not going to change.
Yeah.
I'm not a rich man by any way, shape, or form, but I know I'm not stupid, or I hope I'm not stupid. If I was to bet on a fight, a real fight, Mayweather against the Big Show, I would put my money on the Big Show, because the Big Show is one big motherfucker.
Yeah.
He would pick Mayweather up and use him as a fucking toothpick in the real world. But for him to knock out the Big Show was an insult to my and every wrestling fan's intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no doubt, it was not a good night for the Big Show, but, you know...
the Big Show's, in my opinion, Big Show's never recovered from that.
No.
At all.
No.
You want to think about...
A person who's that big...
He was laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah.
Make no mistake.
I mean, for a person who's that big, to be perfectly honest, Mayweather wouldn't even be a fly on his arse. Mayweather might be the
you know that
the,
I know
the
that Big Show knows that
boxer at his weight ever. From his own words, I don't think he is. I think he's full of himself. But in his own mind, he's the greatest boxer God ever put breath in. But at his own weight, in fighting somebody like the Big Show in a real fight, come on, even if you're a Mayweather fan, you're not going to think he's going to beat the Big Show.
Oh, and you know what? And again, I totally agree with you, and I think this is just... Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I don't even think Big Show was even sweating it. If that was an issue, Big Show wouldn't have done it. So, you know...
Do you know what? This has got nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it has in a way. I've been reading specifications on the internet, and I can't remember the exact specifications, but they were putting boxers from the year dot up to present day who'd got the hardest punch. And people who have the hardest punch are not the boxers that you would expect. And I don't think people realise you can have the hardest punch in the world. It don't make you a good fighter. When you hit somebody, they'll go, shit, that hurt. If you don't hit people in the right place, they're not going to go over on their arse. And you don't need a lot of power to hit someone in the right place to knock their head back and knock them unconscious. If you hit someone under the chin, sweep under the chin and fling their head back like a whiplash effect, like that wrestler that died, God rest his soul. That's how most boxers will knock somebody on their arse. If you hit someone full in the face, you could break every bone in the face. Doesn't mean you can win the fight. So when they keep saying, well, of the two, Pacquiao and Mayweather, Mayweather's got the hardest punch. If we live on the assumption that Mayweather's got the hardest punch, so we live on the assumption that the person with the hardest punch is the hardest person on the planet, then Evander Holyfield could hit harder than any man on the planet. Fact. Go and check the statistics on the internet. Why didn't he win every fight he had if he'd got the hardest punch?
Well, that's I guess that's a discussion when we do wrestling versus boxing next week's on HWR In the Moment.
I can honestly see there's going to be, at some point, a boxing match on WrestleMania. At some point. Or a UFC. Or probably a bit of both. In my lifetime. I can see it happening.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up this edition of In the Moment. Please make sure you like this video, and please put any comments in the comments section below, and please follow us over at facebook.com/Hardcore Wrestling Radio, and subscribe to us over at youtube.com/HWR Show. We have the incomparable Lance Moss, and you can find him over at youtube.com/Lance Moss TV. Lance, what do you got going on?
I got album reviews, NASCAR discussion videos, redneck gormless videos, musical equipment reviews, some rants, the archives of controversies and scandals from this very show. And please subscribe and follow me on Twitter. It's at Lance Moss TV.
And of course, we have the son of a bitch, Andy. Andy, where can everyone find you at?
You can find me at the local lunatic asylum when they let me out. If you see me sitting outside in my rocking chair, the best place to catch me is on www.stokehaunted.com. But I can't reply back to you if my arms are around my waist.
All right. Well, for everyone here, I'm your hardcore host, Rick Head, saying we'll see you when we see you. Thank you for listening to this edition of In the Moment. Make sure you follow us at any one of our locations, whether it's YouTube, Dailymotion, and now SoundCloud.com under the name HWR Show. Until the next time, this is your hardcore host, Rick Head, saying we'll see you when we see you.